I should have known something was wrong when she said she was fine, but there was a flicker of fear in her eyes, the kind that no words could hide, no smile could cover. My daughter, Emma, always spoke so highly of her husband, Alex. She would tell me that he was the most thoughtful man alive, always rushing to make her coffee in the morning, never letting her lift a finger around the house. She said he'd pick her up when it rained, cook homemade chicken soup when she was sick, and even do his goofy dance whenever she had a bad day, just to make her laugh. I listened, of course, nodding along and smiling, but something in my gut kept twisting, something I couldn't shake. Her voice sounded light, but her eyes told a different story. They were the color of worry, hollow and distant, as if a light had gone out behind them. This was the third time Emma had been in the hospital in just as many months, and each time the reason was always different. First it was the flu, then a stomach bug, then a simple fall down the stairs. But Emma had never been clumsy. She had always been the careful one, the type to hold on to the handrail when climbing just a few steps. I felt the weight of my years of motherly instincts kicking in, telling me that something wasn't right. I needed to know what it was. But as she said, "I'm okay, really." There was a small laugh at the end, and I knew she wasn't. Later that night, I called my son, David, but his dismissive tone only made my heart sink further. "Mom, you're overthinking. Emma's fine. You know how she is. She's just always had these random health issues." But I knew Emma better than anyone. Something in her was hiding, something deep beneath that perfect image of her happy life with Alex. I couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't being honest with me. And so, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for her to tell me the truth. I wasn't going to let her live in fear, even if it meant taking matters into my own hands. I wasn't about to sit by and hope for the best. A mother knows when her child is in danger, even if that child doesn't admit it. So, I packed my bags, bought a bus ticket, and headed straight for Cedar Ridge. I didn't tell Emma, didn't tell anyone. I had to see for myself what was going on behind the walls of that picture-perfect life. And when I got there, I found something I never expected, something that changed everything. As I sat there, staring at the phone screen, listening to Emma speak, something inside me couldn't shake the feeling that all wasn't well. She was speaking in the same cheerful tone she always used, but this time the words felt hollow. "I'm fine. Mom, really, everything is great. Alex is such a sweetheart. He's always there for me, never lets me do anything. He makes me coffee every morning, picks me up when it rains, and even makes me laugh when I'm feeling down." She smiled as she spoke, but there was an emptiness in her eyes that no smile could cover. It was subtle. Most wouldn't have noticed it, but as her mother, I saw it clearly. I'd known Emma since she was a little girl. She had always been cautious, always careful, never the type to fall down the stairs, never the one to claim a stomachache for no reason. And yet, here she was, on the other side of a video call, telling me about her third visit to the hospital in the last few months. The first time, it was the flu. The second, a stomach bug. And now, a simple fall down the stairs. But this wasn't like Emma. She used to grip the handrail just to walk down a few steps, so there was no way she would have just fallen. No way that Emma, so careful, so mindful of every move, would trip on something as simple as stairs. I gripped the edge of my phone tighter. She was lying to me. I knew it. I didn't need to hear her voice quiver or see the small shifts in her eyes to know. A mother knows when something is off, and something was definitely off. But Emma didn't want me to worry. She had always been like that. She hated to burden anyone with her problems. She would always brush things off, cover them with a smile, tell me she was fine when she wasn't. And here she was, doing the same thing again. "I'm really okay. Mom," she said, her voice almost pleading as if she were trying to convince herself, "Stop overthinking it. I'm fine. I'll be fine." She gave a little laugh, the kind of laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was the laugh of someone who wanted to believe their own lies. I nodded slowly, trying to keep my face neutral, not wanting to press her further. I could tell she was shutting down, but I couldn't help myself. As a mother, I had to know the truth. If I didn't ask the right questions, she wouldn't give me the answers. So I stayed quiet, nodding, agreeing with her, and letting her talk. But the more she spoke, the more I felt the weight of something heavy settling in my chest. This wasn't just about a fall or a stomach ache anymore. This was something bigger, something deeper. And I wasn't going to sit idly by, pretending everything was fine. Not this time. Not when I knew my daughter was hiding something. She was hiding her pain, her fear, and I couldn't let her carry that alone any longer. After we hung up, I felt like I was suffocating. I couldn't get the image of Emma's face out of my mind. She had looked so tired, so defeated. She was wearing that forced smile again. But I knew the truth behind it. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and scared. I had been a mother long enough to recognize the signs. I knew when something wasn't right, even if my child wasn't ready to admit it. That night, I called my son, Michael, to talk it over. He was always more practical, less emotional than I was, but I needed someone to help me see things clearly. I needed someone to tell me that I was overreacting, that Emma was fine. But when I told him about my concerns, his response only made my anxiety grow. "Mom, you're overthinking it. She's just been through a lot lately. You know how she is. She's always had health issues. It's nothing new, but that's just it. This wasn't normal. Emma hadn't always had these kinds of health problems. She wasn't someone who could just fall down the stairs without warning, and she certainly wasn't the kind of person to brush off injuries like this. Her condition wasn't just physical. Something had changed. I could feel it in my bones. Something was wrong, and I wasn't going to sit here and wait for it to get worse. I think I need to go see her," I said, my voice steady even though my heart was pounding in my chest. Michael hesitated on the other end of the line. "Mom, are you serious? You can't just show up there. It's a 3-hour drive." "What if she's just being dramatic?" "I'm serious," I said firmly, cutting him off before he could say anything else. "She's my daughter, and I know when she's lying to me. I need to see her. Michael, I need to make sure she's okay." There was silence for a moment before he spoke again, his tone softer now. "Just be careful, okay? Don't do anything rash. I didn't tell Emma. I didn't want her to know I was coming. I knew she would protest. Tell me it was unnecessary. But I couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't just sit here pretending that everything was fine. I packed a small bag, grabbed a bus ticket, and left without saying goodbye to anyone. I had to get to Cedar Falls. I had to see for myself what was going on behind closed doors. When I arrived, I didn't head straight to her apartment. Instead, I checked into a small motel across the street. I didn't want to raise any alarms or make Emma suspicious. I spent the first few hours just watching the building, keeping my distance. I wanted to see if she would come out. I wanted to know what her life really looked like. I spent the afternoon at a cafe across the street, sipping on coffee and keeping an eye on the entrance of her building. Time passed slowly. And still, I didn't see her. It was getting late, and I was beginning to feel the weight of my decision. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was overreacting. But something told me that I wasn't. At 9 that night, I decided to go back to the building. This time, I stood right on the front steps, my eyes fixed on the entrance, refusing to blink. It wasn't until a voice behind me startled me that I even realized someone was standing there. I turned around and found myself face to face with an elderly woman in her pajamas. "What are you, an investigator or something?" she asked suspiciously. I almost laughed at the absurdity of the situation. "No, just a concerned mother," I said. And as it turned out, this woman, Margie, had been watching the building too. She had noticed things, heard things that I needed to know. Over the next few days, Margie and I became unlikely allies in uncovering the truth. She had seen things, heard things I couldn't ignore. The pieces of the puzzle began to fit together, and I knew, without a doubt, that Emma wasn't okay. She wasn't the daughter I had raised, and the life she was living wasn't the one I had imagined for her. I wasn't going to leave until I got to the bottom of it, and when I did, I realized just how far Todd, her husband, had gone to keep her trapped in his control. He had broken her, piece by piece, until she was too afraid to speak out, too afraid to leave, but I wasn't going to let that happen anymore. I was going to get my daughter out of there, and I was going to do whatever it took to make sure she was safe. As I sat in front of the phone, listening to my daughter Emma speak, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling growing in my chest. She was describing her life with Todd, her husband, as though it were a perfect fairy tale. He was always so thoughtful, so attentive. Every morning, he'd rush to make her coffee, never letting her lift a finger around the house. She told me he would pick her up when it rained, cook her favorite homemade soup when she was sick, and even do his goofy little dance to cheer her up whenever she was having a bad day. To an outsider, it sounded like the ideal marriage, but as she spoke, I couldn't help but notice the way her voice wavered, the way her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. It wasn't just the words she said, it was the way she said them. Her expression was forced, her tone a little too upbeat. Her eyes, those eyes I knew so well, were distant, almost hollow. It was the kind of look I had seen before, the kind of look that says, "I'm hiding something." I had been a mother for long enough to recognize the signs. And deep down, I knew something wasn't right. Emma had always been so careful, so cautious. She had never been the type of person to trip down the stairs or catch every illness that went around. In fact, she used to be the one to grip the handrail tightly when she walked down a few steps. So the idea that she was suddenly prone to accidents didn't sit well with me. She wasn't clumsy. She wasn't the type of person to just fall. I clenched my phone a little tighter, the weight of her words pressing down on me. She claimed it was just another trip to the hospital because of the flu. But this was the third time in just a few months that Emma had been hospitalized. And each time, it was for a different reason. The first was the flu. The second was a stomach bug. And now it was a fall down the stairs. It all seemed too coincidental, too much of a pattern, too many trips to the hospital that didn't add up. And the more I thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. The way Emma was talking, it was as though she was trying to convince herself, not me, that everything was fine. She had always been the kind of person to keep her emotions bottled up inside, but this felt different. There was something in her voice, something in the way she was talking, that made me feel like she was trying to hide the truth from me. I didn't want to push her too hard. I didn't want to make her feel like I was accusing her of lying. But at the same time, I couldn't ignore the feeling gnawing at me. I had been a mother for long enough to know when my child was in danger, even if they didn't want to admit it. I needed to know what was going on, and I couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was fine when I knew it wasn't. That night, I called my son, Michael. He wasn't as close to Emma as I was, but I needed someone to talk to, someone who might offer a different perspective. When I told him about my concerns, he brushed them off. "Mom, you're overthinking it," he said. "Emma's always had these health issues. You know how she is. She's just a little frail sometimes. She's fine. Todd treats her really well. They're fine." But I couldn't shake the feeling that Michael wasn't seeing the full picture. I didn't want to scare him, but something inside me told me that something was wrong with Emma, and I wasn't going to let her hide it any longer. I tried to dismiss my worries, but they kept creeping back in. There was something deeper going on, something more than just a few hospital visits. I didn't trust Todd. I didn't trust that everything was as perfect as Emma made it seem. My instincts told me something wasn't right, and I couldn't ignore them. I spent the rest of the night turning things over in my mind, going back and forth between my fears and the desire to believe that everything was okay. But I couldn't ignore the growing sense that Emma was hiding something from me. The next morning, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to sit here any longer, waiting for Emma to come clean. I wasn't going to wait for her to ask for help. I was going to find out the truth for myself. I couldn't just leave her in a situation where she might be suffering, even if she wasn't ready to admit it. I didn't tell Emma. I didn't tell anyone. I booked a bus ticket to Cedar Falls and set off on a journey to uncover the truth. I knew it would be hard, but I couldn't sit back any longer. I needed to see her. I needed to make sure she was safe. When I arrived in Cedar Falls, I didn't go straight to her apartment. Instead, I checked into a motel across the street. I wasn't sure what I was going to find, but I knew that I needed to be cautious. I couldn't alert her to my presence just yet. I needed to watch her from a distance, to see what her life was really like. I spent the first few hours just observing, keeping an eye on the entrance to her building. But still, Emma didn't come out. It was getting late, and my stomach churned with uncertainty. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe this was all in my head. But the feeling that something was off still gnawed at me. At 9 Assyria that night, I decided to take a more direct approach. I walked to the front steps of her building, my heart racing in my chest. I stood there, not knowing what to expect, but determined to find answers. And then a voice broke the silence behind me. "Are you with the FBI or something?" it asked, sounding suspicious. I turned around to see an elderly woman standing there in her pajamas, holding a leash in her hand. She had been watching me, too. It turned out she had noticed the strange behavior in the building, and she had information that could help me. The woman, Margie, and I began to talk. She told me that she had heard things that didn't sound right. She had heard voices late at night, a woman crying, begging for help. That was all I needed to hear. I wasn't imagining things. There was something happening inside that building, something that Emma wasn't telling me. Margie and I became allies in my search for the truth. She had seen things, heard things that no one else seemed to notice. I knew I was right. Emma was in danger, and I wasn't going to let her stay in that situation. I made my way to her apartment the next morning. I didn't knock on the door. I just entered the code she had given me, and the door opened. What I found inside broke my heart. Emma was sitting on the edge of her bed, her face pale and gaunt. She had a bandage wrapped around her swollen ankle, and her eyes, those eyes that once shone with life, were empty. When she saw me, that emptiness cracked, and fear rushed in to take its place. "Mom, what are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice hoarse and strained. And that was when I knew Emma wasn't just sick. She wasn't just clumsy. She was trapped. She was afraid. And I was going to get her out of there, no matter what it took. The more I observed, the more I felt the weight of a truth I wasn't ready to face. My daughter Emma had always been a pillar of strength in my eyes. She was independent, careful, and strong-willed traits I'd always admired. But something had changed. As I stood outside her apartment building, watching the lights flicker in the windows, I knew I couldn't wait any longer to uncover what was happening behind those walls. I had made my way to Cedar Falls with a single mission in mind: to find out the truth. Emma's voice over the phone had been filled with a forced cheerfulness, the kind that never reached her eyes. The more she told me about her seemingly perfect life with Todd, the more my gut twisted. Todd, according to Emma, was the model husband, always doing thoughtful things for her, always making her laugh and caring for her when she was sick. But as I listened, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too perfect to be true. I had known Emma for too long, and I could tell when something was wrong. Her eyes told a different story than her words. She had been hiding something, and I needed to find out what it was. After a long day of waiting and watching, I finally decided to take action. I couldn't just sit in a motel room, questioning myself. I had to confront the situation head on, even if I didn't know what I would find. At 9:00 p.m., I crossed the street to Emma's apartment building, my heart pounding in my chest. I couldn't explain it, but there was an urgency now, a need to act before things got worse. I needed answers, and I needed to know my daughter was safe. As I stood on the front steps, a voice behind me startled me. I spun around and found an elderly woman in pajamas, holding a leash in one hand. Her expression was sharp, almost suspicious. "Hey, you with the FBI or something?" she asked, eyeing me curiously. I almost laughed. "No, just a concerned mother." I replied, not sure how to explain myself. The woman studied me for a moment, then leaned in with a knowing look. "I've been watching you, been standing here for hours. You know, the neighbors don't usually hang around here like this. What are you looking for?" At that moment, I realized she had seen the same things I had. She had heard the same noises, felt the same unease. She wasn't just a curious bystander. She was a part of the puzzle I needed to solve. This woman, Margie, had been paying attention. She had seen something that I hadn't noticed, and she was willing to share it with me. Margie told me she had overheard strange noises coming from Emma's apartment late at night, things that didn't sound like a simple argument. She mentioned hearing a woman crying, begging, and then there was a crashing noise. My heart sank. I didn't want to believe it, but the pieces were starting to fall into place. Emma wasn't just dealing with a few minor illnesses. There was something more sinister happening, and it was right in front of me. Margie leaned in closer, her voice lowering. "You know, your daughter seems like the quiet type, keeps to herself. But I've seen him, her husband. I don't trust him. He's the kind of man who hides behind a smile. But there's something wrong with him, something I can't put my finger on." I listened carefully, my heart pounding in my ears. The more Margie spoke, the more I realized I was right to be worried. Emma's perfect life was an illusion, a carefully crafted mask to cover up the truth. I knew I couldn't leave now. I had to find out what was going on, no matter what. The next morning, I decided to visit Emma's apartment, but instead of going straight to her door, I took the time to gather more information. I knew I couldn't force my way in, so I waited across the street, keeping my eyes trained on the entrance. Hours passed, and still, Emma didn't emerge. I texted her, asking what she was doing, but her reply was the same as always, working late again. Mom, don't worry about me, but I knew better. Something didn't add up. As the sun began to set, I walked back to her building, determined to see things through. I didn't knock on her door. I had a code to enter, one that she had given me months ago, but I never thought I'd need to use. With trembling hands, I typed the code into the keypad, and the door clicked open. My heart skipped a beat. Inside, the apartment was eerily quiet. The lights were dim, and the air smelled stale, like it hadn't been aired out in days. There was an air purifier humming in the corner, and the curtains were tightly drawn, shutting out the daylight. It felt like a tomb. I stepped inside, my footsteps muffled on the carpet. On the coffee table, there was a bowl of dried soup, the remnants of a meal she had been too tired to finish. A few strands of hair clung to the rim of the bowl. Everything felt lifeless, as though no one had been living here. When I made my way to the bedroom, I found Emma sitting on the edge of the bed, her back to me. Her hair was tangled, and her face was pale, so pale, it looked as if the life had been drained from her. She was holding onto the blanket like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Emma, I whispered, taking a cautious step forward. She turned slowly, and when she saw me, her eyes widened with shock. The mask of composure she had been holding up shattered. Tears welled in her eyes as she blinked in disbelief. What are you doing here? Mom. Her voice was hoarse, cracked from crying. I didn't know what to say at first. My heart ached seeing her like this. She had always been the strong one, the one who held everything together. And now here she was, broken and vulnerable. I moved closer and gently wrapped my arms around her. She flinched at first, but then leaned into me, her tears soaking into my shoulder. You're not safe here, Emma, I said softly. You can't stay in this place anymore. You don't have to hide from me. I'm here. I'm going to protect you. And just like that, I knew everything was about to change. No longer would she face this alone. I wasn't going to let her continue to suffer in silence. It was time to take action, to help her break free from the life she had been trapped in for so long. As I held Emma in my arms, my heart ached. The realization of how long she had been living in this silent torment, this invisible prison, hit me with the force of a freight train. I had always known my daughter to be strong, independent, and self-sufficient, but now, seeing her so broken, so frightened, I felt like I was seeing a stranger. She wasn't the same girl who used to laugh freely, the girl who would light up every room she walked into. This was someone else, a woman weighed down by fear, by shame, by years of emotional manipulation and control. Mom, you shouldn't be here. If he finds out, he'll lose it, Emma whispered, her voice trembling as she pulled away slightly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, and her body was tense, as if she were bracing for something terrible to happen. The words she spoke were filled with both a warning and a plea for understanding. She didn't want me to be caught in the chaos of her situation. She didn't want me to witness the consequences of defying Todd, but I wasn't afraid. I wasn't going to let her face this alone anymore. I took her face in my hands, my fingers trembling as I cupped her cheeks. You're not alone in this, sweetheart, I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside me. We're leaving. We're getting you out of here. You don't have to stay in this place anymore. Emma's eyes filled with tears as she looked at me, her lips trembling as she whispered, "He locks the door from the outside. He's controlling everything. I can't even make a phone call without him knowing. He took everything from me. Mom, even my own voice." The weight of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Todd had taken everything from her, her sense of self, her freedom, her voice. He had systematically broken her down, isolating her from the world and controlling every aspect of her life. And now, Emma was too afraid to even call for help. I squeezed her hand gently, my heart breaking for her. I knew she had always been the type to protect others, to shield them from her pain. But now, she didn't have to do it anymore. I would protect her, no matter the cost. "Where is the report, Emma?" I asked softly, my voice urgent. She hesitated for a moment, glancing over at the nightstand. Slowly, she pointed toward the drawer. I opened it and found a worn, torn manila folder hidden beneath a scarf. Inside was the report she had mentioned, a medical report from 2 weeks ago. It was dated, detailing a right ankle fracture caused by an external force. The words hit me like a slap to the face. It wasn't an accident. Todd had hurt her, and he had covered it up, making her sign documents that gave him legal authority over her. I folded the report carefully, slipping it into my bag. This was the first piece of concrete evidence I had that something was horribly wrong. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to prove that Todd had been abusing her, controlling her, trapping her in this nightmare. I needed more. I needed to find the truth, to expose him for what he was doing to my daughter. "We're leaving now," I said firmly, standing up and grabbing my coat. "We don't have much time. Let's go." Emma hesitated, her face pale with fear. "I can't walk. Mom, my ankle hurts so much. I don't know if I can make it." My heart twisted in my chest. I knew she was right. Her ankle was swollen, bruised, and it was clear that she could barely stand. But I wasn't going to let her stay here. Not now. Not ever again. I bent down in front of her, gently lifting her into my arms, cradling her as though she were still the little girl I used to carry. "You're going to be okay, sweetheart," I whispered, feeling the weight of her body against mine. "I'm here. I'm not letting you go." I could feel the tension in her body as I carried her down the hallway, my arms aching under her weight. But I didn't care. I didn't care how much it hurt. I wasn't going to leave her in that apartment, in that life, ever again. When we reached the stairs, I hesitated for a moment. I knew it would be hard, but there was no other way. The elevator was out of service, and the stairs were the only option. I gritted my teeth and began to climb, carrying her step by step, feeling the strain in my back with each movement. Every step felt like a victory. Every step was one closer to freedom. By the time we reached the bottom, I was exhausted. My arms were shaking, and my legs felt like they were going to give out beneath me. But we had made it. We were almost out. When we reached the lobby, I heard a voice behind me. It was the front desk clerk, a young man who looked concerned as he saw me with Emma in my arms. "Ma'am, are you all right? You don't look so good," he said, his tone full of worry. I forced a smile, trying to stay calm. "Thank you for asking," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "This is my daughter. She had a bit of a blood sugar drop. I'm just getting her home to rest." The clerk looked like he might ask more questions, but before he could, Margie appeared out of nowhere, rushing to my side. "Susan, you finally made it out. Come on," she said, her voice full of excitement. She turned to the clerk. "Young man, can you help me check if my cat snuck out the back door again? You know how fast she is." While the clerk was distracted, Margie gave me a knowing wink, and I helped Emma through the doors. We made it to the parking lot where our rental car was waiting, and I gently helped Emma into the back seat. She clung to my arm, her eyes closed, her face pale and weary. "Mom, you really came," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I kissed her forehead and pulled the blanket tighter around her. "I swear, sweetheart, no one is ever going to hurt you again." As I drove away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, but I knew the battle wasn't over. We had a long road ahead of us. Todd was still out there, and he would stop at nothing to keep his control over Emma. But one thing was certain: I would protect her, no matter what it took. As I held Emma in my arms, my heart broke. The realization of how long she had been living in silent torment in an invisible prison hit me with the force of a freight train. I had always known my daughter to be strong, independent, and self-sufficient. But now, seeing her so broken, so frightened, I felt like I was seeing a stranger. She wasn't the same girl who used to laugh freely, the girl who would light up every room she walked into. This was someone else, a woman weighed down by fear, by shame, by years of emotional manipulation and control. "Mom, you shouldn't be here. If he finds out, he'll lose it," Emma whispered, her voice trembling as she pulled away slightly. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with fear, and her body was tense, as if she were bracing for something terrible to happen. The words she spoke were filled with both a warning and a plea for understanding. She didn't want me to be caught in the chaos of her situation. She didn't want me to witness the consequences of defying Todd. But I wasn't afraid. I wasn't going to let her face this alone anymore. I took her face in my hands, my fingers trembling as I cupped her cheeks. "You're not alone in this, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady despite the storm of emotions churning inside me. "We're leaving. We're getting you out of here. You don't have to stay in this place anymore." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she looked at me, her lips trembling as she whispered, "He locks the door from the outside. He's controlling everything. I can't even make a phone call without him knowing. He took everything from me, Mom, even my own voice." The weight of her words hit me like a slap to the face. Todd hadn't just hurt her physically. He had stripped away every ounce of security and autonomy she once had. He had trapped her in a cycle of manipulation and control. And now, Emma was too afraid to even reach out for help. "Where is the report?" "Emma," I asked softly, my voice urgent. She hesitated for a moment, glancing over at the nightstand. Slowly, she pointed toward the drawer. I opened it and found a worn, torn manila folder hidden beneath a scarf. Inside was the report she had mentioned, a medical report from 2 weeks ago. It was dated, detailing a right ankle fracture caused by an external force. The words hit me like a slap to the face. It wasn't an accident. Todd had hurt her, and he had covered it up, making her sign documents that gave him legal authority over her. I folded the report carefully, slipping it into my bag. This was the first piece of concrete evidence I had that something was horribly wrong. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to prove that Todd had been abusing her, controlling her, trapping her in this nightmare. I needed more. I needed to find the truth, to expose him for what he was doing to my daughter. "We're leaving now," I said firmly, standing up and grabbing my coat. "We don't have much time. Let's go. Emma hesitated, her face pale with fear. I can't walk. Mom, my ankle hurts so much. I don't know if I can make it. My heart twisted in my chest. I knew she was right. Her ankle was swollen, bruised, and it was clear that she could barely stand. But I wasn't going to let her stay here. Not now. Not ever again. I bent down in front of her, gently lifting her into my arms, cradling her as though she were still the little girl I used to carry. You're going to be okay, sweetheart, I whispered, feeling the weight of her body against mine. I'm here. I'm not letting you go. I could feel the tension in her body as I carried her down the hallway, my arms aching under her weight. But I didn't care. I didn't care how much it hurt. I wasn't going to leave her in that apartment, in that life, ever again. When we reached the stairs, I hesitated for a moment. I knew it would be hard, but there was no other way. The elevator was out of service, and the stairs were the only option. I gritted my teeth and began to climb, carrying her step by step, feeling the strain in my back with each movement. Every step felt like a victory. Every step was one closer to freedom. By the time we reached the bottom, I was exhausted. My arms were shaking, and my legs felt like they were going to give out beneath me. But we had made it. We were almost out. When we reached the lobby, I heard a voice behind me. It was the front desk clerk, a young man who looked concerned as he saw me with Emma in my arms. "Ma'am, are you all right? You don't look so good," he said, his tone full of worry. I forced a smile, trying to stay calm. "Thank you for asking," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "This is my daughter. She had a bit of a blood sugar drop. I'm just getting her home to rest." The clerk looked like he might ask more questions, but before he could, Margie appeared out of nowhere, rushing to my side. "Susan, you finally made it out. Come on," she said, her voice full of excitement. She turned to the clerk. "Young man, can you help me check if my cat snuck out the back door again? You know how fast she is." While the clerk was distracted, Margie gave me a knowing wink, and I helped Emma through the doors. We made it to the parking lot where our rental car was waiting, and I gently helped Emma into the back seat. She clung to my arm, her eyes closed, her face pale and weary. "Mom, you really came," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I kissed her forehead and pulled the blanket tighter around her. "I swear, sweetheart, no one is ever going to hurt you again." As I drove away, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief, but I knew the battle wasn't over. Todd was still out there, and he would stop at nothing to keep his control over Emma. But one thing was certain: I would protect her, no matter what it took. The weight of what I had just discovered was pressing down on me, but I couldn't afford to dwell on it. Not now. Not when Emma needed me. I had spent hours walking around the city, looking for answers, but I was no closer to getting to the truth. The pieces were there, scattered in front of me, but I needed more to put the puzzle together. I wasn't going to let Todd get away with it, not after everything he had done to her. As I sat in the quiet corner of the diner, my mind raced. Every part of me screamed to rush to Emma's apartment, to confront Todd, to drag her out of that hellhole right then and there. But I knew better. I needed to be smart. I couldn't afford to make any rash decisions. There were still too many unknowns. I had no idea what Todd might do if he found out I was involved. I had to think about Emma's safety first. The waitress brought me a cup of coffee, and I absent-mindedly stirred it, my eyes scanning the room but not really seeing anything. My mind kept drifting back to Emma's words, how she had told me Todd locked the door from the outside, how he controlled every part of her life. I had seen the bruises, heard the fear in her voice, but there was so much more beneath the surface. She had been silenced, manipulated into thinking that she was the problem, that she wasn't strong enough to escape. But I knew better. I knew she was stronger than she thought. As I stared into my coffee, the realization hit me like a jolt of electricity. If I was going to help Emma, I needed something concrete proof, something to show people, to show the authorities that Todd wasn't the perfect husband he appeared to be. I had to dig deeper. I couldn't just rely on what Emma had told me. I needed to go to the source. My first instinct was to go to the hospital. I had a gut feeling that they would have more information, more evidence. Emma had been in and out of the hospital too many times for it to be a coincidence. I had heard from Margie that the neighbors had heard things late at night, things that didn't sound like a simple argument. There were signs that something much darker was happening in that apartment. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. I picked it up, my heart skipping a beat when I saw the number on the screen. It was Tracy, a nurse I had known for years. She was sharp, trustworthy, and had always had an instinct for sniffing out the truth. I had reached out to her earlier, hoping she might be able to dig up some information from the hospital system. "Hey, Susan." Tracy's voice came through the line, calm but tinged with concern. "I've got something for you. I looked into Emma's records, like you asked. There's something strange about her visits. I can't access everything, but I found something that doesn't sit right." I sat up straighter, my heart racing. "What is it?" Tracy hesitated before speaking. "It's about the intake report. There's a file for her from a few weeks ago, something about an injury to her ankle. The report says it was a fall, but the way it's written doesn't match up. The doctor suspected abuse, but it was all logged as an accident. No follow-up was done. And the worst part, the file was flagged, and it looks like someone tried to erase it." I felt a chill run through me. This was it. This was the proof I had been looking for. I had known Todd was hiding something, but hearing it from Tracy made everything feel real. "Do you have access to more details? Anything concrete I can use?" "Not yet," Tracy replied, her voice tense. "But I can get a screenshot of the records for you. It'll take a bit of time, but I'll make it happen." "Please, do it," I urged. "I need anything I can get. We're not leaving this until we have enough to bring him down." "Don't worry," Tracy said. "I'll get it to you as soon as I can. Just stay safe." "Okay." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling as I absorbed what Tracy had said. The pieces were finally falling into place. Todd had manipulated the system, trying to cover up his tracks, but the cracks were starting to show. And now, I had the chance to expose him. I didn't waste any time. I called Emma and told her what I had learned. "Emma, I know this is scary, but I've got something we can use. We're not going to let him get away with this." She was quiet on the other end of the line, the fear still in her voice. But there was a flicker of hope in her words. "What do we do now?" "We take the next step," I said firmly. "We get the evidence, and we go to the police. We're going to make sure he can't hurt you anymore." As I set down the phone, I felt a sense of determination settle in. Todd might have thought he could control Emma, that he could control all of us, but he was wrong. The truth was coming out, and there was no way he could stop it. With the proof I needed on the way, I made the decision to visit the hospital. I had to make sure everything lined up. I couldn't risk leaving any stone unturned. It was time to finish what I had started. The following days passed in a blur of uncertainty and preparation. I couldn't afford to waste any more time. I had already seen the evidence, the bruises, the broken ankle, the report that had been hidden away by Todd, but I knew that Emma still wasn't ready to fully face the truth. I could see the fear in her eyes every time she spoke about him, the way she flinched at the sound of his name. She wanted to escape, but she didn't know how. I was her mother, and it was up to me to be her strength. I couldn't let her go back to that place. I couldn't let her return to that nightmare, to the man who had stolen her voice and crushed her spirit. But I also knew that it wasn't enough for me to simply take her away. We needed something concrete to hold Todd accountable. We needed proof, not just from Emma's word, but from the authorities. That night, after everything had settled down, I made the call. I knew that without Emma's cooperation, things would be difficult, but I also knew that if we didn't act now, we might lose our chance to stop Todd before he hurt her again. I spoke with the police officer who had been assigned to Emma's case, and I explained everything I had found: the medical report, the bruises, the emotional manipulation. I told him everything I knew about Todd's behavior, how he had isolated Emma, how he had controlled every part of her life. The officer listened carefully, his voice calm but firm. He assured me they would open a formal investigation, but I could sense the hesitation in his words. Without Emma's direct testimony, the case would be weaker. I called Emma that night. I had to convince her that speaking out was the only way to break free. She was quiet at first, her voice tinged with fear and uncertainty. "What if he finds out?" she asked, her words barely above a whisper. "He won't find out until it's too late," I reassured her. "We'll protect you. Emma, you don't have to live like this anymore. You're not alone in this." There was a long pause on the other end of the line before she spoke again, her voice trembling but determined. "What do I need to do? We'll do this together," I said, feeling a surge of relief. "I need you to be brave. We're going to gather everything, all the evidence we have, and we'll make sure he can't hurt you anymore. You don't have to be afraid of him anymore." The next morning, Emma and I went to the community clinic. I knew Tracy, a nurse I had known for years, was on duty. She had always been someone I could trust, and I knew she would help us gather the necessary information without hesitation. Tracy had worked in healthcare for a long time and had seen her share of abusive situations. She knew how to handle things discreetly, and I needed her expertise. When we arrived at the clinic, I could see that Emma was nervous, her body tense, but she didn't say anything. She followed me through the doors, her eyes darting around the room, as though expecting Todd to pop out from behind every corner. I could feel her anxiety, and it broke my heart. But we had come this far, and there was no turning back. Tracy greeted us with a warm smile, but I could see the concern in her eyes when she saw Emma's pale face. "It's good to see you, Susan." "And you, Emma," she said, her voice kind but serious. "Let's get this sorted out." "Okay." Tracy took Emma into the exam room, and I sat in the waiting area, nervously drumming my fingers on the armrest. The minutes felt like hours. I knew Emma was scared, but I also knew that this was the right thing to do. She couldn't continue living in fear. I wouldn't let her. When Tracy finally came back, she had a grim expression on her face. "This isn't just a sprain, Susan," she said, her voice low. "This is a direct trauma, blunt force. It looks like it was caused by a fall, but it's clear it wasn't just an accident. She's been hurt. Someone did this to her." My heart sank. I knew the truth now, but hearing it from someone else made it all the more real. Todd had done this to her. I was sickened by the thought, but I also knew that I couldn't stop now. We had to make sure he paid for what he had done. "We need the medical records," I said, my voice steady despite the rage bubbling inside me. "We need everything, her intake, the doctor's notes, anything that can prove he did this." Tracy nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "I'll see what I can do. But you know it won't be easy. We'll need Emma's consent for anything official." I looked at Emma, who was sitting quietly in the exam room, her face pale but resolute. "Emma," I said, walking over to her, "we need to do this. This is the only way to stop him. You're not alone. We have the strength to get through this." Her eyes welled with tears, but she nodded. "I'm ready." "Mom," she whispered. And with that, we took the first step toward making sure Todd couldn't hurt her again. We would gather the evidence, we would fight back, and we would make sure he faced the consequences of his actions. For Emma's sake and for our family's future, I wasn't going to stop until justice was served. After the intense days of gathering evidence and confronting the truth, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. Emma and I had done everything we could to ensure her safety, getting the medical records, making the necessary calls, and finally bringing her out of Todd's reach. But there was a weight that wouldn't lift, a knot that remained tight in my chest. Todd hadn't given up. I knew he would be looking for us, trying to figure out where Emma had gone. I had to be ready for what came next. As Emma and I settled into our new life, it felt surreal. The peace I had hoped for was fleeting. Emma was adjusting, but the trauma of the last few months still clung to her like a shadow. She was quiet most of the time, her eyes haunted by memories of the life she had left behind. I knew she wasn't the same person she had been before all this began. The strong, confident young woman I had raised now seemed fragile, uncertain, as if she were still trying to find herself again. But there were moments of light, small victories. I saw it in the way she smiled when we walked into the kitchen together, the first time in weeks she had laughed while making dinner with me. I saw it in the way she started to engage more with the world around her, opening up to the people who cared about her. I knew it would take time for her to heal, but I also knew she wasn't alone. She had me, and I wasn't going to let her face this recovery on her own. Yet, even in these moments of healing, the fear of Todd's retaliation was never far from my mind. The phone calls that Emma would receive, even though I knew they were from blocked numbers. The way she would flinch when a car passed by too closely. She was still afraid of him. I could see it in the way she reacted to the smallest things he had conditioned her to fear everything, to question her own instincts, to feel like she wasn't worthy of freedom. I had no illusions about the battle we were up against. Todd was not the kind of man who would let go easily. He was calculating, manipulative, and would stop at nothing to regain control over Emma. We both knew he would come after her. I had already started making plans, preparing for what might come next. I knew I couldn't keep Emma hidden forever. I had to protect her, but I also had to prepare her for the storm that was about to hit. I called the lawyer the next day. It wasn't something I had planned to do immediately, but it became clear to me that this wasn't going to be over without some legal action. I needed to ensure that Emma had the legal protection she needed, that there were no loopholes Todd could exploit. The lawyer was firm but reassuring, outlining the steps we would need to take to protect Emma legally. The first step was filing a report. I had already collected the evidence, the medical reports, the screenshots of Todd's attempts to alter the hospital records, and the notes from the neighbors who had heard the arguments. But what I needed most was Emma's statement, her voice, her truth. She needed to stand up for herself and speak out. I knew it wasn't going to be easy for her. It would bring everything back to the surface, make it all real in ways that would be impossible to ignore. The day came when Emma sat down with me in the quiet of our living room, ready to make the call to the police. I could see the fear in her eyes, but I also saw something else, determination. For the first time in months, I saw my daughter taking control of her own story. She wasn't letting Todd have power over her anymore. She was ready to speak up. When the phone call ended, Emma looked at me, her eyes bright with tears. "I did it, Mom," she said softly, her voice shaking but full of strength. "I'm free." And in that moment, I knew everything had changed. The police would take her statement, the investigation would begin, and Todd would no longer be able to hide behind his charm and manipulation. The truth was out, and there was no going back. But even more than that, Emma had taken back her power. She had made the decision to reclaim her life, and no one could take that away from her. As I held her close, I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The road ahead would still be difficult. We would still have to face the repercussions of what Todd might do next. But we weren't alone anymore. We had each other, and we had the strength to keep moving forward. For the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I knew there would be challenges, but I also knew that together, Emma and I could overcome anything. Todd might have tried to break us, but he didn't realize that we were stronger than he ever thought. And now, we were ready to take back what he had stolen from us, our lives, our freedom, and our future. As I looked at Emma, sitting next to me with tears in her eyes, but a newfound strength in her voice, I realized just how far we had come. She was no longer the frightened woman she had been just weeks ago. She had found her voice, taken back her life, and stood up for herself in a way that I had always known she could. The journey to get here had been long and painful, but in the end, it was worth every moment. We had fought for her freedom, and now she was free. The lesson I want to share with all of you is this: no matter how dark things may seem, there is always a way out. Sometimes it feels like you're trapped, like there's no hope, but your voice, your strength, and your courage can change everything. It takes time, it takes support, and it takes the willingness to face your fears and push through them. Don't ever let anyone take your power away from you. You are stronger than you think. And the first step to reclaiming your life is believing that you deserve it. If you're going through something similar, or if you know someone who is, remember you are not alone. Reach out for help. Speak your truth. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel. Leave a comment below to share your thoughts and experiences, and let's continue supporting each other. You're not just a survivor, you are a fighter, and together we can keep fighting for a better, freer future.